Howdy, my fellow gamers, and welcome back to another episode of Storytime with Freak. This time it's actually with Freak. Thank you so much, Chrono, for stepping up the last few weeks while I was recovering from the burns in the hospital and everything. It's been a delightful road. As you guys can see, we are in a new room. The ex-fiance moved out, so we have moved into the master bedroom. I'm still in the process of setting it all up, hence like the giant bag of clothes back there and everything else. But baby steps. This is looking pretty good. I need to get more RGB strips, but I don't have any more, and I can't afford more right now because due to coronavirus, I'm unemployed right now, which just means more videos and streams for you guys. So without further ado, Chrono knocked out a couple chapters for us. We are now in book 3, or what do they call it, like year 3, I don't know, the next section of the Toll, part 3. There you go. So at the end of the last episode, you know, we saw Goddard doing some shit, Anastasia talking to Jericho, and the Toll getting his own personal scythe bodyguard assassin. So without further ado, we are going to dive right on in and knock out probably, I'd say, 2 chapters or so. Starting with chapter 26, A Receptacle for the World's Hatred. Wow, there's not even a little prelude, like excerpt from the Thunderhead or anything. Rowan did not know any of these things that had transpired during his 3-year absence. Unlike Citra, no one briefed him. Anything he picked up, he learned in passing. He did not know Goddard was in charge of most North America now, which wasn't good for anyone and was definitely not good for Rowan. Now he stood tied to a glass column in the center of Goddard's crystal chalet. Wasn't there an expression about glass houses and throwing stones? Well, if he had a stone, he wouldn't throw it. He'd hide it until he could use it for something more effective. He'd been revived the day before, just as Highblade Pickford said he would be. Death was not good enough for Scythe Lucifer. Knowing Goddard, his end would be filled with much pomp and pageantry. Goddard came to see him with Scythe Rand by his side as always. The expression on Goddard's face was not one of fury, it was actually welcoming. Warm, if a cold-blooded thing could ever be said to have a warm expression. It threw Rowan for a loop, made him uncertain. Rand, on the other hand, looked worried, and Rowan knew why. "My dearest Rowan," Goddard said, arms wide as if moving in for a hug, yet stopping a few yards away. "Surprised to see me?" Rowan asked, as flip as he could force himself to be. "Nothing surprises me about you, Rowan," Goddard said, "but I'll admit, I'm impressed that you managed to come back after the sinking of Endura, which you sank." "On the contrary," Goddard said, "you sank it. That's what the record shows and will always show." If he was trying to get a rise out of Rowan, it wasn't working. He had already made his peace with bad publicity. When he chose to become Scythe Lucifer, he knew he'd be hated. Of course, he just expected it to be hatred among Scythes. He never thought he'd be despised by the rest of the world. "You seem happy to see me," Rowan observed. "That's probably because of the physiology of the body you stole." Tiger's body reacting to seeing his best friend. "Perhaps," said Goddard, glancing at Tiger's hands as if they might actually grow mouths and say something to him. "But the rest of me is happy to see you as well. You see, as a boogeyman, Scythe Lucifer is a nuisance. But as an actual man, he's someone I can use for the betterment of humankind." "The betterment of Goddard, you mean?" "What's good for me is good for the world. You must realize that by now," Goddard said. "I see the larger picture, Rowan. I always have. And now, by showing the world that Scythe Lucifer is subject to judgment, it will help people to rest a little easier." Through all of this, Scythe Rand said nothing. She had taken a seat and was watching, waiting to see what Rowan would do, what accusations he'd make. After all, she was the one who'd set Rowan free on Endura. He could be quite a fly in her ointment, but that would be no better than throwing a stone. If you're hoping to be remembered, don't worry. You will be. Once you've been gleaned, your name will be an eternal receptacle for the world's hatred. You're infamous, Rowan. You should embrace that. It's the only fame that you'll ever have. And much more fame than you deserve. Consider it a gift for all we've been to each other. "You're really enjoying yourself, aren't you?" "Oh, immensely," admitted Goddard. "You can't imagine how many times I've stood here pondering all the ways I could torment you." "Who will you torment when I'm gone?" "I'm sure I'll find someone else. Or maybe I won't need to. Maybe it's just the last thorn in my side I'll ever have to deal with." "No, there's always another thorn." Goddard clapped his hands together, truly tickled. "I have so missed these conversations with you." "You mean the ones where you gloat and I'm tied up?" "You see, the way you get to the heart of the matter is always just so refreshing, so entertaining. I'd keep you as a house pet if I didn't fear you'd somehow escape and burn me to a crisp in my sleep." "I would, and I would," Rowan had told him. "I have no doubt." "Well, rest assured, you won't be escaping today. We no longer have the blunderings of Scythe Brahms to deal with." "Why? Was he devoured by sharks like the rest of them?" Yes, I'm sure he was, Goddard said, but he was dead before they got to him. Punishment for having allowed you to escape. Right. Rowan said nothing more about it, but he did catch Rand out of the corner of his eye, shifting in her chair as if it had suddenly grown hot. Goddard came closer to him. His voice became softer. You might not believe this, but I really have missed you, Rowan. There was an honesty to the simple statement that transcended Goddard's habitual showmanship. You're the only one who dares to speak back to me anymore. I have adversaries, yes, but they're all pushovers, easily bested. You were different from the beginning. He took a step back and looked Rowan over, praising him the way one might appraise a faded painting that had lost its allure. You could have been my first Underscythe, Goddard said, an heir to the world Scythedom, and make no mistake, there will be a single world Scythedom when I'm done with it. That would have been your future. If only I had ignored my conscience. Goddard shook his head in pity. Conscience is a tool, just like any other. If you don't wield it, it wields you. And from what I see, it has bludgeoned you senseless. No, the world needs the unity that I offer far more than it needs your simplistic understanding of right and wrong. The thing about Goddard was that he always came close enough to making sense that it was demoralizing. He could twist your own thoughts until they were no longer yours, but his. That's what made him so dangerous. Rowan found his defiance and fortitude draining away. Was Goddard right about anything? A voice inside him said no, but that voice was spiraling deep into its shell. What's going to happen to me? Rowan asked. Goddard leaned forward and close and whispered in his ear, A reckoning. Scythe Rand thought this was all behind her. She had been on one of her Construct Sanctum excursions when word came that Scythe Lucifer was alive and in Amazonia. The mission to retrieve him from the Amazonians took place without her knowledge. He was already en route to Goddard, told her the glorious news. It was terrible timing. With more warning, she would have found a way to glean him before he reached Goddard, if only to keep his mouth shut. But here he was, and his mouth stayed shut anyway, at least about her. Did he keep the secret just to see her squirm? Aang wondered what his game was. This time Goddard wasn't so cavalier as to leave Rowan alone in his room. 2 guards were assigned to be in there with him. They were ordered to keep their distance and keep their eyes on him at all time. You'll check on him every hour, Goddard told Aang, to see that he hasn't loosened his restraints or compromised the guards. You should render them deaf so he can't subvert them, she suggested. It was meant as a joke, but Goddard took it seriously. Sadly, they'd heal within an hour, so instead of deafening the guard, silence was achieved the old-fashioned way. Rowan was gagged. However, when Aang came to check on Rowan that afternoon, he had managed to work the gag off. He was all smiles in spite of being practically hogtied. Hi, Aang, he said brightly. Having a good day? Haven't you heard? She quipped back. Every day's a good day since Goddard became Overblade. We're sorry, Your Honor, said one of the guards. Since we were ordered to keep our distance, we couldn't replace the gag. Perhaps you can do it. What's he been saying? Nothing, said the other guard. He's been singing a song that was popular a few years ago. He tried to get us to sing along, but we didn't. Good, said Aang. I applied your restraint. Through all of this, Rowan smiled didn't fade. You know, Aang, I could have told Goddard that you were the one who set me free back on Endura. Just like that, he just laid it out there for the 2 guards to hear. Lying will get you nowhere, she said for the sake of the guards, then ordered them both to wait outside the room, which, in a place where so many of the internal walls were still clear glass, didn't hide anything from view, but at least the room was soundproof once the door closed. I don't think they believed you, Rowan said. You really didn't sell it. You're right, said Aang, which means I'll have to glean them now. Their deaths are on your hand. Your blade, not mine, he said. She took a moment to glance at the 2 guards, oblivious on the other side of the glass wall. The problem wasn't gleaning them, but hiding the fact that it was her doing. She'd have to order some low-level scythe to do it and then persuade the scythe to self-glean. And all in such a way that it wouldn't seem suspicious. What a mess. Setting you free was the worst decision I ever made. Not the worst, said Rowan. Not even close. Why didn't you tell Goddard? What possible reason could you have? Rowan shrugged. You did me a favor and I returned it. Now we're even. And besides, he added, you undermined him once. Maybe he'll do it again. Things have changed. Have they? I still don't see him treating you the way he should. Has he ever told you what he told me today? That you'd be the heir to the world Scythedom? No. Seems to me that he treats you the way he treats everyone else. Like a servant. Aang took a deep breath, suddenly feeling very much alone. In most things she enjoyed being a party of one, but this was different. What she really felt was a complete lack of allies. Like everyone in the world was an enemy, and maybe they were. She hated the fact that this smug boy could make her feel that way. You're much too dangerous than he gives you credit for, she told him. But you're still listening to me. Why? She didn't want to consider the question. Instead, she ran through her mind all the ways she could glean him right then and there, and damn the consequences. But if she gleaned him, she knew it wouldn't take. There was no way to render him unrevivable there in the penthouse, which meant Goddard would just bring him back to face the very specific judgment he had planned them. And then, when he was revived, maybe Rowan would tell Goddard everything. She was bound just as completely as Rowan was. Not that it matters, but I just want to know, Rowan said. Do you agree with everything he does? Do you think he's taking the world in the right direction? There is no right direction. There's only a direction that makes things better for our kind and directions that don't. By our kind, do you mean scythes? What else would I mean? The Scythes were meant to make the world better for everyone, not the other way around. If he thought she cared, he was barking up the wrong tree. Ethics and morality were the hobgoblins of the old guard. Her conscience was clear because she had none, and had always taken pride in that. He means to publicly end you, she told Rowan. And by publicly, I mean in a way that will leave no doubt in anyone's mind that Scythe Lucifer is gone forever, vanquished and extinguished for all time. Is that what you want? I will not mourn you, Rand told him, and when you're gone, I will be relieved. He accepted it as true because it was. You know, Scythe Rand, there's going to come a point when Goddard's ego gets so far out of control that even you can see the danger of it. But by then, he'll be so powerful there won't be anyone left to challenge him. Aang wanted to deny it, but she felt a goose flesh rising, her own physiology telling her that there was truth in what he said. No, she wouldn't mourn Scythe Lucifer, but once she was gone, there would be plenty to worry about. You really are just like him, she said. You both twist people's minds until they don't know which way is up, so you'll excuse me if I never speak to you again. You will, Rowan said with absolute certainty, because after he ends me, he'll make you dispose of whatever's left of me, the way you disposed of what was left of Tiger, and then, when no one's listening, you'll snipe at my charred bones just so you can have the last word. Maybe you'll even spit on them, but it won't make you feel any better. And it was infuriating, because she knew he was right on every count. Chapter 27, Tenkaminen's Pleasure Dome. The Spence traversed the Atlantic with Scythe Anastasia sailing a different course of the region of Sub-Sahara on the African continent. It was a distance much shorter than most people might think, taking just under 3 days. They arrived in the coastal town of Port Remembrance while the North American Scythes were still searching for Anastasia in the far reaches of South America. In mortal days, Port Remembrance had been known as Monrovia, but the Thunderhead decided that the region's dark history of subjugation and slavery, followed by poorly planned repatriation, warranted an entirely new name that would offend absolutely no one. Naturally, people were offended. But the Thunderhead stuck to its decision, and as with all decisions the Thunderhead made, it turned out to be the right one. Scythe Anastasia was met by Sub-Sahara's High Blade, Tenkamen himself, upon her arrival. As a vocal opponent of Goddard, he had agreed to provide her secret sanctuary. So, much ado about a junior Scythe, he said in a booming, genial voice as he greeted her. His robe was colorful and meticulously designed to pay homage to every historical culture in the region. Not to worry, little one. You're safe and among friends. While Citra found Pasuelo's no, my angel, endearing, being called Little One felt diminutive. She held her head high as Scythe Anastasia, and in the name of diplomacy did not comment. Instead, Jerry did it. Not so little, Jerry said. The High Blade threw Jerry a dubious gaze. And you are? Jericho Soberanis, captain of the vessel that so successfully brought Anastasia into your welcoming arms. I've heard of you, Temin Commandant said. A scavenger of note. Salvager, Jerry corrected. I find what's lost and fix things that are beyond repair. Noted, said Ten Commandant. Thank you for your fine service. Then the High Blade put a fatherly arm around Anastasia, leading her away from the dock with his entourage. Oh, but you must be tired and hungry for something more than the maritime fare. We have all things prepared for your comfort. Jerry, however, kept pace with them until Ten Commandant asked, Have you not been paid? Surely Pasuelo has taken care of that. I'm sorry, Your Excellency, Jerry said, but Scythe Pasuelo specifically assigned me to be by Scythe Anastasia's side at all times. I sincerely hope you're not asking me to violate that order. The High Blade heaved a dramatic sigh. Very well, he said, then turned to his entourage as if it was a single entity. Set an extra place for a fine Madagascan captain at dinner, and prepare an adequate room. Finally, Anastasia spoke up. Adequate will not be adequate, she told the High Blade. Jericho risked everything to bring me here, and should be treated with the same courtesy as you treat me. The entourage braced for something volcanic, but after a moment the High Blade laughed heartily. Ha ha ha! Spunk, he said. It is highly valued here. We will get along. Then he turned to Jerry. Captain, forgive me, but I love to toy. I mean nothing by it. You are most welcome here as an esteemed guest, and will be treated as such. Jerry had received no such order from Pasuelo. Jericho was told to bring Anastasia here and the job would be done. Jerry, however, was not ready to part ways with the turquoise Scythe, and besides, the crew of the Spence was overdue for some downtime. The western shores of Sub-Sahara would be a welcome leave, and that freed Jerry to keep an eye on Anastasia and the High Blade, who seemed a little too integrated. Do you trust him? Jerry asked Anastasia before they got into the sedans that would spirit them into Ten Commandant's palace. Pasuelo does, Anastasia says. That's good enough for me. Pasuelo also trusted that junior Scythe who sold you out to Goddard, and Jerry pointed out. Anastasia had no response to that. I will be your second pair of eyes, Jerry told Anastasia. Probably not necessary, but I appreciate it, she said. Jerry was usually about the bottom line, but found that Anastasia's appreciation was payment enough for services rendered. Ten Commandant, who went by Tenka to those close to him, had a disarming and effusive nature to go with his deep voice, a voice that resounded even when he whispered. Citra found it endearing as well as intimidating. She resolved to put it aside. Citra Terra Nova and be Scythe Anastasia at all times around him. She noted that Ten Commandant's genetic index leaned a bit toward Africa, Understandable as this was the continent that had contributed those genes to humanity's biological melange, Anastasia herself had a tinge more African in her than Pan-Asian. Caucasoid, Melistothono, or the other sub-indexes that were corralled under other. As they rode together, Tenkamenon read it in her and commented on it. We're not supposed to notice these things, he said, but I do. All it means is that we're a teeny bit more closely related. His residence was more than just a residence. Tenkamenon had built himself a stately pleasure dome. I do not call it Xanadu, as Kublai Khan did, he told Anastasia. Besides, Scythe Khan had absolutely no taste. The Mongolian Scythedom was right to bulldoze it the moment he self-gleaned. The palace was, like Tenka himself, stylish and the epitome of good taste. I am no parasite taking over estates and mansions that belong to others, then kicking them out, he told her, proudly. This place was built from the ground up. I invited entire communities to work and filled their idle time with rewarding labor. And still they work, adding more each year, not because I asked them to, but because it is their pleasure. Although Anastasia initially doubted it was their choice, her conversations with the coworkers proved her wrong. They truly did love Tenka, and the time they devoted to working on his palace was entirely of their own accord. It didn't hurt that he paid far above and beyond the basic income guarantee. The palace was full of old-world eccentricities that were whimsical and added to the flavor of the place. The anachronistic uniforms of the staff were all from different historical eras. A collection of classic toys going back hundreds of years, and then there were the phones. Boxy plastic things of various colors that sat on tables or hung on walls. They had handsets that were connected to the bases by long curly cords that stretched, like springs, and tangled easily. I like the idea of communication tethering you to a single spot, Tenkamenon told Anastasia. It forces you to give every conversation the attention it deserves. But since those phones were reserved for Tenkamenon's private calls, they never rang. Anastasia supposed it was because there was very little private about Tenkamenon. He lived his life like he were on a window in display. The morning after her arrival, Anastasia was called in for a meeting from Tenkamenon and Scythes Baba and Makeda, permanent fixtures in the High-Blade's entourage whose apparent purpose in life was to be an audience for him. Baba had a biting wit and enjoyed making jokes that no one but Tenka understood. Makeda seemed to find her greatest joy in belittling Baba. Ah, our Lady of the Deep arrives, said Tenka. Won't you? We have much to discuss. Anastasia sat, and they offered her little sandwiches with the crusts cut off, arranged on a tray like a pinwheel. The High Blade was all about presentation. It is my understanding that the world is spreading around your revival. While Goddard's allies are trying to keep it quiet, our old guard friends are making it known. We'll build the anticipation so that when you officially present yourself, the whole world will be listening. If the world will be listening, I'll have something to say. You will, Tenka said, with such certainty that it made her wonder what he had in mind. We have stumbled across some information of the most incriminating kind. Incrimination in a world without crime or nation, said Baba. Imagine that. Tenkamenon laughed, and Scythe Makeda rolled her eyes. Then the High Blade reached across the table and placed a small origami swan on Anastasia's empty bread plate. Secrets folded upon secrets, he said. Tell me, Anastasia, how skilled are you at digging through the Thunderhead's backbrain? Very, she told him. Good, said Tenkamenon. Then, when you unfold the swan, you'll find something to get you started. Anastasia turned the swan over in her fingers. What will I be looking for? You must blaze that path. I won't tell you what to look for, because if I do, you'll miss the things you would intuitively find. The things we probably missed, added Makeda. We need fresh eyes on this. And besides, said Scythe Baba, triple-teaming her, it's not enough for you to know. You've got to find it, so you can show others how to find it too. Precisely, said Tenkamenon. A successful lie is not fueled by the liar. It is fueled by the willingness of the listener to believe. You can't expose a lie without first shattering the will to believe it. That is why leading people to truth is so much more effective than merely telling them. Tenkamenon's words hung in the air, and Anastasia looked at the swan again, not wanting to ruin it by unfolding its delicate wings. Once you draw your own conclusions, we'll share what we know, said Tenkamenon. I guarantee you your excursion into the backbrain will be a most eye-opening experience. And that is the end of chapter 27. Thank you all so much for watching today. Maybe the next one will go a little bit longer, knock out a couple more chapters, but for my first one back in a month, my voice is a little hoarse already, talking out loud so much. And, yeah, next one we'll do probably 2 chapters, actually, because that's a good 25 pages right there. But thank you all so much for having me back as your host for Storytime. It has been fantastic to see you. And our conversational topic for the day will be, are you leaning towards getting an Xbox Project Series X or a PlayStation 5, and why? Let me know down in the comments below. Check out the links below as well. You can join our Discord, check out the Twitches, you can check out the merch links. There is a GoFundMe for my medical bills. It has been an absolute pleasure to see you all again, and I will catch you all in the next one very soon. Stay freaky.